Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. You may notice regular participants in these live streams will notice that I have a new background behind me, and that is because over the course of the last month, I've relocated from my home of most of the last 40 years in the New York City metropolitan area. I've been in Brooklyn for the last couple of years, and I'm now out here in my new home in Prescott, Arizona. And you're seeing the broadcast today from the Orinoco Chocolate Alchemy Factory and Retail Showroom. I'm uh, being introduced to the company. I've been joining them in some of their consulting projects over the past couple of years, and have decided to make the move here when circumstances changed in New York City. And so you'll see everything is new here, and this is the first live stream, and I'm getting things situated. So if you can hear me just fine, please let me know in the comments. If there's a technical problem, please let me know in the comments. And if you're watching, you have questions, or just general want to do a shout out, go into the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Let me know what part of the world you're connecting from. I'll give you a shout out. And then you can use the same mechanism to ask questions over the course of the next hour. Before we get into today's topic, which is deconstructing the chocolate scorecard, I'm gonna want to do a real quick tour and show people. This is the homepage of TheChocolateLife.com right now. You can see that for every single one of these live streams, I do publish a post which covers the topic that I'm going to be talking about in any given day. There are resources which get linked to, so you don't have to follow along and try to get the URLs of these resources during the live stream. You can always go back to them. And then over the course of the hour, if there are new topics which are brought up, I will have a chance to drop them down in the resources links to them so that you can follow on after the live stream. So having said all that, let's jump really quickly into today's topic, which is deconstructing the chocolate scorecard. The link to this page is on the Chocolate Life, so you can go to it in today's post. The reason why I want to share with you today, the purpose for today's live stream, is all about understanding how to read these scorecards, right? There are ratings and reviewings of various aspects of the cocoa and chocolate industry, and many different organizations do these things. What they are is they are proxies. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have trust in the work that is being done, so that what you can do is put your confidence in what it is that they're reporting. And the challenge is, if you don't know much about cocoa, you don't know much about chocolate, you don't know much about how to read these reports, then how do you understand when they present the results, what it is that they mean? So that's the whole idea of today. So one of the first things to do in looking at something is actually go through and take a look at what it is that they're purporting to say. So they give the purpose. The purpose is we all eat chocolate. We surveyed the world's biggest chocolate companies to find out what's going on with the sourcing of cocoa. Now, that's a really interesting turn of play. We're looking at the chocolate scorecard, number one, but when we look at this is all about cocoa sourcing. So to some extent, we need to keep that in mind. This is what they're really talking about. They're talking about sourcing cocoa, and what does sourcing cocoa have to do with chocolate? And it turns out to be very, very important in a couple of respects. So what they've done is they've given their overall Good Egg Award to a company called Original Beans for their regenerative approach to growing and making chocolate. Interesting. For Tony's Chocolonely for seeking to bring structural change to the entire cocoa sector. They've given a Rotten Egg Award to both General Mills and Walmart for their lack of public policies and commitment in their cocoa procurement. Number one, neither General Mills nor Walmart, I believe, source cocoa directly. So what they do is they source cocoa directly from the big industrial chocolate makers. So they might be buying product for Cargill, they might be buying product from Barry Callebaut, they might be buying product from Belcolada or any one of a number of other companies. They don't actually source cocoa directly. Tony's Chocolonely sources cocoa directly but they don't manufacture chocolate. And Original Beans is involved in sourcing cocoa, but they also don't manufacture chocolate. So to some extent, we're measuring or reporting about different things, and it's not clear to the average consumer, I don't think, about how these differences are presented, not only in this short snapshot, but further on down in the way the results are presented. Right. So what they have, which is new for this year, for the 2023 scorecard, is they have an interactive table, and you can go through this interactive table, and what you can do is you want to go look to see if your particular favorite brand is listed here. So if I just want to type Berry, what I do is I find that Berry Calabout is listed here, and I can get their overall rating very, very quickly. I believe some of these columns are sortable. So you can look at an overall score and see what the overall score is from low to high or high to low. I do not, so you can also sort by alphabetically and by product name. Now, one of the things you may or may not have noticed, but it says products here. But if we scroll down, we'll find that there are pictures of products. But when we move out of the companies that sell products retail, what we do is we find that products is now we have manufacturers and processors. And to the person who's not up to speed on what what the industry is like, then what they may not be able to do is understand what the differences is between a chocolate manufacturer and a cocoa processor. So that's number one thing to understand here. So they're mixing and matching. So the database is it's not what's called normalized. They're using the same column to represent multiple topics in the database or multiple concepts, and that's a challenge. So anyway, I already know from my experience that reading through this is going to require careful understanding of what differences are in the industry. And it's so this table, while it provides access much more interactively, there are some questions that it raises which don't appear to be answered at the on the surface. So we have Lynn who is asking the question, Nguyen, who's asking how exhaustive is the list? This year, 43 companies were invited to participate. So that's how exhaustive the list is. Now, they tried to, in one case, I think they mentioned that they tried to get companies that represent something like 90% of all the cocoa that is produced in the world, but the total number of companies, so when you're asking about exhaustive, I think the number of different companies that are involved, the total number is 43. And that's gone up over the last couple of years. But in terms of the number of companies that are actually involved in the world of cocoa and chocolate, it's a relatively small number. If you wanted to, you could download a PDF of it for yourself. And there's a separate scorecard which focuses on the big retailers. Now, I think that many people would recognize Aldi as a retailer, right? But there are, I believe, sub-brands that Aldi owns. This Royal Ahold down here. So Ahold, I would have to know, for example, that Ahold owns the Stop and Shop brand here in the United States to understand what this means. So, but there are only 3 retailers that are mentioned here. One of the things that's really weird to me about this is that we go to the top and what we find out that Walmart, right, is got a rotten egg award, but for example, Walmart is not included on this list of retailers, and you'd think they would be. And one of the reasons why may be that what they've done is they've, rather than doing an interactive table where everything is visible at once, what they've done is they've organized the table. So here are 3 brands which get their green bunny award. Here are brands which get the yellow bunny award. And here are brands which get a mix of the yellow and orange bunny award. But I'm looking at this, and are there more? Right? So Walgreens is there, and Walmart is down here in the list. So for some reason, they decided to change the way the information is presented. And if you weren't paying close attention, you might miss all of these all of these other retailers. So I'm sort of confused as to why they changed the way the data was presented, the data were presented in here. So you have to be very, very careful in taking a look not only at the data itself, but the way the data are presented. So this particular table, it's actually just a slideshow of images. There's no way to go and say, I just want Tesco, or I'm looking for a particular retailer. And it's confusing to me why they didn't go and do this. Just it makes the job, my job and your job as a consumer looking at these tables a whole lot harder in terms of being able to understand how to deconstruct them. Now, having gone through that, and we've sort of run through this very, very quickly, there's a very important aspect of the way the scorecard is presented to people. And this is this link, find out how we did it, right? And if you click on this link, what you'll do is you'll find that it goes to a document where it lists, the methodology. So how we create the chocolate scorecard. And in this respect, I have to give the organizers full props in the depth of the explanation for what they're doing. Most of the time when you see something like this, the methodology is either compressed into one overview page, which doesn't give a whole lot of detail. But here we have 19 pages which explain what it is that's going on. Now, if you get one of the scorecards itself, and I believe that seeing this scorecard picked up by many, many websites around the internet and by magazines and newspapers. What you'll do is you'll get this image, this PDF, or pages from this PDF, and there are no active links. Or in the past, there were no active links. So right now on the homepage of this, we don't have any. So this is the PDF of the scorecard, not the interactive version of the scorecard. There's no active link that says find out how we do it. And if it's a PDF, so there should very definitely be, there is the ability to include active links in here. And so not having a how we did it link right here, what's going really on, is for me just mystifying. The fact that none of these links, right, none of these things are actually active links, right, is mystifying to me. We need to understand the average consumer won't even have the option or being introduced to the option to be able to understand how this document is prepared. So I think that's a real shortcoming of these reports, the fact that they don't do this. So if we look at the methodology, and by the way, if we go to the homepage, one of the things you'll find, which I think is interesting, is if you hover over the scorecard link, you can get the scorecard in more than a dozen languages. So they translated the scorecard into, but it looks like both, it looks like Korean and Japanese are up there, and for some reason Romanian, Estonian, and Finnish are among the language that these have been translated into. But English, French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese are all there. So that's, I think, one of the things that makes this information more accessible than many of the other similar kinds of projects that are going on here. Right? So that's good. And also, when we look at the methodology, if we were to go to the find out how we did it link, what you'll do is you'll discover that the methodology is explained in 4 different languages as well. So it's been translated. So yay, that's really, really good. So you get an idea, all right, what's going on. So if we also click on the methodology, right, what we can do is we've got a definition of sustainability. Yay, so they've told us what sustainability means, right? That's a really good thing. In addition to surveying chocolate companies, they survey experts, and they get a whole lot of data which is collected. They talk about participation in data collection, really, really important. What are we doing? How are we going about and talking with people? How we are going to talk with retailers. And this next one, confidentiality and data protection, it turns out to be a very, very interesting aspect of this, because these customers, the people who respond to the survey, are in fact providing what many might consider to be confidential and proprietary company data, right? And so some aspects of this need to be preserved from privacy, need to be preserved. Otherwise, these companies are not going to talk to you at all. They're just not going to. And they may decide just not to participate. And there are a number of companies every year who decide for one reason or another not to participate in what's going on. So again, just from a little bit of information design, this is a PDF. The PDF has links on it. We click on this highlighted yellow one. For some reason, all the links are not highlighted yellow, not certain. It says for here, the research team created explanatory videos, published the full survey, glossary, and relevant research on the resources page. Well, if you actually go to the resources page, you'll find, listen, if you are interested in any of these concepts, right, at all, having to do with sustainability and traceability and the different aspects of it that people are looking like on a global basis, then the set of links that are here will provide you with a lot of background reading that you can go through. And perhaps by the end of this hour, you'll have some of the tools which are going to be necessary to take a closer look at what it is that they're saying and make, sorry, I got a new set of headphones and it's coming out, to be able to read them more critically. And in the end, that's what I want to happen. I want to provide the people who are watching this, whether you're doing it live or whether you do it afterwards, with the tools to be able to go through and be able to be a more critical observer of what it is that's going on, perhaps taking fewer things at face value. Now, one of the things that it says on the methodology page, that it says on the resources page, that they published the survey. And it turns out, no, they didn't publish the survey on the resources page. What they did is they published the survey on the exploring. It's right here, the scorecard questions. And if what you wanted to do, if you wanted to look at the survey, here is in fact all the questions on the survey. So if you want to get a much deeper dive, and there are 74 pages of survey questions and instructions, you'll get an idea of what it is. We don't actually get the de-identified, unprotected, unprivileged data presented to us separately. That makes sense, although I would really, really love to be able to get a whole lot more detail in terms of understanding how the questions were answered in general. And then also, really, really importantly, there's a glossary and FAQ, right? That you can go and take a look at. So if you are really, really interested in understanding what it is that's going on, I would go and definitely recommend taking a look at the questions and taking a look at the FAQ. The FAQ is a different FAQ. So we have an FAQ in the top navigation, and many people might say, okay, I've read that. And they come down here and they say the glossary and FAQ, and they might go, maybe I've already read it. And when you click on this, you find that there's an entirely different set of questions. You need to be a very astute reader, right? Paying very, very close attention and really want to dig into the detail. And my guess is that the FAQ and glossary is only 4 pages, but the survey is 74 pages. And I don't necessarily know that a whole lot of people are going to go and read that. So reading through the methodology, it talks about the 6 categories that are covered. So traceability and transparency. And by the way, traceability and transparency are 2 very different things. So we're conflating extremely different concepts. I can be transparent about what it is that I do, but be very selective in what it is that I am transparent about, and not be transparent about my traceability. So these are, I don't think you can conflate these 2 topics. If this were my survey, I would not conflate these 2 topics. I think they're very, very different. This concept of living income, child labor, deforestation, climate, agroforestry, and agrochemical management. So those are the 6 areas that are being covered in this year's survey. They talk about how they develop the questions. You know, are there other factors which are organizing how the questions are developed? There are links, and you can go and understand all those things to really get an idea about how considered this whole process was, right? Which makes an enormous amount of sense. They give the list of who is involved in scoring. I mean, absolutely. I prefer the word visibility. So from a visibility into the process, the scorecard has evolved over the course of the years that I have been following it, and they are moving towards a much greater visibility in terms of how the process is done and who is involved doing it, which I think is a great idea. They talk about how the process was scored, and then they talk about the evolving nature of the industry and how things need to change over time. So as top performing companies improve, and what it takes to be considered an industry leader is also evolves. So I think they're not using the same standards that they used in 2020 that they're using for 2023, and there's a plan to evolve going forward. But this represents, I think, one of the challenges of this particular survey, which is from year to year to year, what they are measuring and how they are measuring it in the same column change. And there's no discussion of the differences that I could find. I may be there, but there's no discussion of how the evolution has changed. And this becomes really important in a couple of other areas as we look at some of the other scorecards, right? In terms of the way they're visually represented and the way the data are presented on the screen. So it's really, really interesting and important to understand that, again, to be a careful reader of this, right? This is what we need to know, right? So I just wanted to, I'm going through and highlighting these things that caught my attention as I was reading through them. Right? So let's, there we have a question from Teresa Grant, who's in Georgia. And she says, the ratings are based on survey answers. Are the answers verified, fact-checked? And so, Teresa, you ask a very, very good question. So the ratings are based upon survey answers. So I don't know if there is, in fact, what we might think of as a formal fact-checking process. And I don't know how the scorers go and, quote unquote, verify whether the answers are true or not. So one of the things that's really important to understand about this, so it's not clear to me, Teresa, the answer to your question. Yes or no, I don't know the answer to the question. You know, if I were to, you know, if I'm going to ask a big company like Barry Callebaut, I mean, I'd have to go within the same sort of sustainability, traceability industry, other companies that are using the same sort of data that we're trying to collect to verify. And so I don't know that you can get enough distance, right, and provide some sort of independent source of information to be able to go and verify what is being true. And obviously, just from a participation company, one of the fine lines that the survey collectors draw is that if they are extremely negative about a company, that company may not choose to participate the next year. If the questions are too intrusive, or if negative inferences are being drawn, I mean, this is entirely a voluntary process. And so, as I say, one of the fine lines that the survey people need to walk is making sure that they have the voluntary and cooperation of everything, of all the people who are participating in the survey. Now, again, another bit of language, if we look at the Exploring the Chocolate Scorecard page, and let's go back to the homepage, right, is that, right, so what we look at is the scorecard key right here, the scorecard key, right, which is, so number one, that a green egg means that the company is leading the industry on policy, whereas a yellow egg is making progress on implementing policy. And from my perspective, leading the industry on policy is different from why did we leave out the word implementing policy? So what I want to do is I would like this to be changed to say leading the industry on implementing policy, right? So really, really important thing for me that's missing here from the way the language is presented, because I can leave the industry on policy. I could have a company policy that says I need to pay 2.5 times the market rate, and I need to provide schools and all these kinds of things. But am I doing a job of actually implementing the policy? That's a very, very different question. And I really, really want to know why they forgot the word implementing here, because it's, for me, it's a big loophole, and it allows a lot of room for sliding stuff behind. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm not saying that they are doing this. I'm just looking at this and going, wow, it's a big red flag in my mind, and this is a question I would like to know the answer. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, if you're somebody who has involved with Be Slavery Free or Mighty Earth, or has any connection with the way this was put together and you can answer that question, I'd be happy to invite you on as a guest in the future, and we can discuss some of the topics that I mentioned here today. Some of them are just simple, visual design issues. Some of them are, it's very difficult to be consistent on a page-to-page basis when you're so deeply involved in the process. Having somebody on the outside who's looking at it critically can say, well, you said this, but you forgot this link, right, where you said it would be. That's, those are sort of understandable. But this is a really interesting thing for me. I really wonder why. And again, if you're involved anyway with the formulation of the scorecard, contact me. The link to how to contact me is on TheChocolateLife.com. I'll be happy to schedule a live stream in the future and get you on, and we'll talk about that. So we have another question from Lin Yen. Is it possible to nominate chocolate companies so the scorecard team may reach out and invite them to participate in the survey? Not to my knowledge, right? And I believe that the focus on this is, it's really interesting. The focus on this is not necessarily very large companies. And you'd think that the focus would be on very large companies because of the impact that they're making. There are, in fact, some very small companies who are involved here, but they have a lot of brand visibility. The best one of the best examples is the company Original Beans. Original Beans is a small player when it comes to the amount of cocoa that they produce every year. They are a marketing company. They don't actually manufacture the chocolate that they're making. That's something we're going to get to a little later on. And I don't know that the company that manufactures the chocolate for them is listed here. And so that's a really interesting oversight, in my opinion. But Lynn, if what it is that you'd like to do is you'd like to go to the Chocolate Scorecard website, and if there's a contact link, let's go take a look. We know how to do that. We're on the internet. There is only a donate link. There's no how do you contact us link. Support@chocolatescorecard.com. So down here at the bottom, you can see support@chocolatescorecard.com. Let me hide this for everyone. You'll see that if you were to send a link or a request to them, maybe they would accept it, maybe they wouldn't. I can't speak for them, but you do have a way to get in touch with them, and you can send them your request for someone to a company to consider in the future. Right. So again, continuing through the methodology, one of the things that they do is they talk about what the categories are and what are the sub parts of the categories. So when we talk about, for example, traceability and transparency, what it says is what percentage is traceable to the country of origin. And you get, if I can do 96 to 100% of my cocoa is traceable to the country of origin, then I get a score of 3 points. Right? This is where I would like to have more data, because I think that I would like to see of the companies that scored, like Green Bunnies, where the aggregate scores are on average of how they score on this. I would like to know is just some sort of consideration about how these different elements contributed to the score, even if they're completely de-identified. I mean, I would like to know a lot more about how this all works. But we've got, all about what percentage of the cocoa is GPS, is the farm GPS mapped or polygon mapped. I don't necessarily, so this, there's another aspect of this, which is, do I know how many trees there are within the farm? Do I know what the average production level is for trees in this area, so that I could know from a farm of a particular boundary, say, 5 hectares, the maximum production I should be able to get out of it is a certain amount of cocoa. That's part of the traceability. So is there more cocoa being produced from this region or being sold from this region that can be reasonably expected to be produced? An interesting question. How do you get to that from here? I don't know the answer to that question. So one of the things is, does the company have a target date or roadmap for 100% traceability in its direct supply chain? And this is a really important thing. So number one, do I have a roadmap? Yes, I have a roadmap. I have a roadmap to get there by 2030. I get, all right, a commitment, right, based upon the time frame. So if I've already achieved it, 3 points. if I've got it in the next, before 2025, I get 2 points. If I have a commitment to do by 2030, I got 1 point. No stated deadline to get it done, I don't get any points. But notice it says the direct supply chain. So for example, in a country like Ghana, I might be a licensed buying company, and my license might say, okay, I can buy up to 10,000 metric tons, right? And let's say that my customer base in its entirety, I find that I have a demand for 15,000 metric tons, right? So what I do is I go to another licensed buying company and I buy 5,000 metric ton from this other licensed buying company or these other licensed buying companies. And these are part of my indirect supply chain. And I may not have the same confidence in what is going on in my indirect supply chain that is going on in my direct supply chain, right? And it's not, and so this is another, for me, another loophole, right? Oh, right. So, right, we get to understand what it is that they're talking about. It is not necessarily something that the average person would know to understand. But importantly, the next question is, what percentage of cocoa purchased in the country's supply chain, direct supply chain, is verified as coming from the location, right? So, but there's no concomitant, right? Um, um, there's no concomitant understanding. So they do ask the question, does the company have a target date or roadmap for 100% traceability in its indirect supply chain, right? Or for a full transition to a direct supply chain? And so it gets scored the same way. But I don't, it's again, I think that the way that the licensed buying company structure works and the way that sourcing works, having control and complete confidence in your indirect supply chain is going to be really, really difficult to achieve. I'm glad that they're talking about those two things and they're discussing the differences between direct and indirect supply chain. But again, these nuances get entirely hidden in the way the answers are presented. So just how much of this commitment, right, contributes to the score, I suppose, is a way of thinking about it. That I think is missing from here. We've got one number. We don't know what's rolling up into that number. And for me, just having this one number, there are lots of challenges associated with accepting it as being true. So they also indicate here, interesting, there are multiple levels of traceability beyond mass balance. Just so you number one, the whole concept of mass balance, I think, is how do you destroy some traceability? I mean, here's, for people who don't know what mass balance is about. Let's say that what I do is I have a commitment to purchase 20,000 metric tons of Rainforest Alliance cocoa, right? What I can do is I can mix that 20,000 metric tons of Rainforest Alliance certified cocoa in with 50,000 tons of conventional cocoa, right? And I can blend it together, right? As long as I don't actually make more derivative products, whether it's liquor, butter, powder, or I make chocolate from it, in excess of what that 20,000 metric tons would be able to provide for, then I can label everything as Rainforest Alliance certified. I mean, even though there might only be one bean contributing to the product that I have, the entire thing is Rainforest Alliance certified, even if I've blended Rainforest Alliance certified and a conventional cocoa during the mass balance process. So one of the things I have to give props for to Tony's Chocolate Lonely is they do say we do not use mass balance, right? So looking on the back of a label, it's like Rainforest Alliance certified, but it says mass balance. You have no idea what percentage of the cocoa in the product that you're purchasing is actually Rainforest Alliance certified. It could be 100%, it could be 50%, it could be lower than that. So thing to consider about mass balance is I don't think it contributes to traceability. It makes it easier for companies to claim a certification. I think it's a bad idea. If anybody is more of an expert on mass balance and you think there's something I've misrepresented about that, please let me know. That is my understanding of the way things work. Right. So it also says that 100% traceability is difficult to accomplish with constant changes. Even after reaching 100% some years, and might still diminish in other years. I mean, these are really, really interesting things to understand about the way that data is gathered, the way that it is evaluated, which get completely lost in the way the data are presented. And so that's one of the reasons why I want to spend some time here. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. We got another dozen pages to go through. But if you go through and you look at what living income is and how they define living income and the questions around living income. And oh, by the way, I don't necessarily know that any of these companies really has any direct control over living income. The cost of cocoa, the price of cocoa is determined on the commodities exchanges, right? And that is what it is. And so I don't believe that it is fair, speaking in the fair trade context, for some big multinational companies that for the most part are headquartered in consuming countries, not in producing countries, to start determining what is a living income in a producing country. It's something fundamentally unfair. So we think it's okay if you earn $2,000 a year, that's a living income, yay, right? I just think the entire concept is abhorrent, and it is the wrong way to go about solving the problem of endemic poverty in cocoa producing countries, among cocoa farmers and countries that are surrounding, which contribute to illegal labor and traffic labor. I mean, the slavery is and illegal labor are a symptom of a problem. The problem is endemic poverty. I don't think that living income references are the way to solve endemic poverty in these countries. There are other things that can be done. My personal approach to that, but it's really important. You can go and take a look at this. You can go look at the scores. You can go look at the way things are rated. You can get an idea about what a company might get. Really, really interesting. I want to go to the bottom. All right. So overall score, yay. Right. What they say is that here, interesting. Green means leading the industry on policy and implementation. Right, we talked about this earlier. Leading on policy and implementation. And when we went to the page where they talked about it, it didn't say implementation. So it's there. It's just missing from the scorecard. So hey guys, redo the scorecard. So it says implementing policy, that it's there. Right. What it says is you need to get at least 75% overall. I believe that's what it means. And you must have gotten a green in at least 3 categories. So now you can understand to some extent how the ratings are organized. Really, really important to go on. But you had to get through 19 pages in order to understand it. For me, I would have put this all the way up in the front. What do the scores mean? When you look at a green egg or you look at a green bunny, what do they mean? This would be number 1 for me. Oh, I can learn everything that I need to know about what these scores mean from looking at it. The other thing, as I recall, and I need to make sure, is that we're now looking here. Let me get this a little bit bigger. All right, so fill the screen here. Is that that rubric about what the scores mean is not here. Right, so we don't understand again, this means a 75 or 3 greens. We don't get that for here. We don't get the explanation of it. So I now maybe these numbers 2 and 3, right? So 1 is a high score, 3 is a lower score. You will notice that they're green, they're orange. Do they connect with the methodology? Again, this is green and blue. What I would have used is the same color structure here. Green, it says green, but why didn't we make it the color green here, right? Why didn't we make it the color yellow? It makes it the cognitive overload in terms of memory that we need to be able to keep on top of in order to be able to go back and forth and understand it. Just like, for me, there wasn't a real information designer. They might have had a graphic designer involved in designing these things, but no information designer thinking about the consistency of color usage and things like that, just to make decoding everything a whole lot easier. But so it looks like the information in this methodology page is in fact included here on the scorecard using these numbers, but there's no place anywhere that I can remember where these numbers are in fact decoded and presented, right? So just to let you know, right? So looking at the scorecards themselves, and we're going to spend a few minutes looking at this year's scorecard and the previous scorecards, right? So Original Beans gets the Good Egg Award. Yay. Now, one of the things that is not explained here, right, is that Original Beans is a marketing company, right? And hold on a second. All right, sorry, Siri interrupted me for a second. So Original Beans is a marketing company. They don't actually manufacture chocolate, right? And there is no representation here of who actually manufactures the chocolate. I happen to know it's a Swiss company, Felklin. And so what I did on the interactive page is I went to see if Felklin were listed. And Felklin is not listed. It looks like they might not even have been approached because they're not an indie list. So if I go to back to the, the donate page, and I go back to the home page, and I click on the interactive scorecard here, that if I type in Felchlin, Felklin is not listed. So that's interesting. So we don't know anything about the sourcing practices of Felklin as a company, even though we have Original Beans as being the Golden Egg Award winner. And this is one of the differences. This scorecard, even though it says it's the chocolate scorecard, their focus appears to be on sourcing cocoa. And those two things are conflated, and I think it's a mistake to conflate them, right? Because sourcing cocoa and manufacturing chocolate are different things. But if I am a good citizen in sourcing my cocoa, but I have my chocolate manufactured for me by a company that is not a good citizen, I think that should affect my score, right? Personal opinion, it's not reflected in here. And where can we go? Tony's Chocolonely, right, gets high marks in their sourcing, except for chemical management. But chemical management, is that really, how much can a marketing company, which is Tony's, actually have an effect on the agricultural processes at the farm level in a foreign country when they're relying on Rainforest Alliance certification? I believe it's Rainforest Alliance, as opposed to FLO Fair Trade, to sort of organize all that aspect of quote unquote certification at the farm level, right? So how much responsibility can they actually have, and how much of the, I suppose, blame for not being able to have an impact on them should be represented by them, right? And just, I want to know is I just want to make sure if you're watching, if after Siri interrupted what I was doing, if you're still hearing my audio, let me know. Or if you can't hear me, please let me know. Just really, really quickly, I'm going to also check it at my end. I got a new set of headphones, and so I'm learning that there are some buttons on the headphones that I need to be very careful about. So Tony's manufacturing partner is Barry Callebaut, right? And even though this scorecard is about Tony's getting a Good Egg Award for seeking to bring structural change to the entire cocoa sector through collaboration, I don't actually know how effective, if they've actually been able to influence at all, any of Barry Callebaut's sourcing policies. And so but the fact that Barry Callebaut is involved as a manufacturing partner for Tony's is not disclosed here, for me, is a real red flag, right? That I would really like to know. So we find that a company like Alter Eco, their chocolate is manufactured for them by this company here, Chocolate But one of the things that's interesting about this is if we go and take a look at the 2022 scorecard, right? What we do is we find that Chocolate right, is not one of the green bunny companies, right? It's, I believe, a yellow bunny company, right? And they're here somewhere. We're out of alphabetical order, right? I remember seeing them in the 2022 list, right? So one of the things that we've lost here, right, is some understanding about these relationships. And it turns out that I think that these relationships are really, really important, right? one of the things that is consistent between the 2022 and the 2023 scorecards is that these columns, traceability and transparency, living income, child labor, deforestation and climate, agroforestry, and agrochemical management are now consistent. But when we go to leave it is to the 2021 scorecard, the categories are different. Due diligence, traceability, and transparency. So due diligence, just like dropped off. And then this agrochemical management has changed and taken its place. But the order of things, right, is different where the columns are. I mean, this makes it really, really difficult to be able to understand the changes from time to time because we're doing really, really different visual presentations of what's going on. So number one, supports regulation here, it's due diligence here. We find that we have pretty much some of the transparency and traceability, deforestation, agroforestry, and living income, child labor, but their columns are in different locations. And so if you're trying to do a one-to-one comparison of these different categories, it becomes incredibly different. But one of the things that I wish that the scorecard did that it doesn't do, right, is that it doesn't indicate evolution and progress. Right? So they talked about how the nature of scoring changes, how the questionnaire evolves over time to keep up with changes in the industry. But one of the things that this scorecard fails to incorporate, that I wish that they did incorporate, was what last year's score was, right? And whether it's up by how many places or down by how many places, right? Or it's like last year's Green Egg Award winner. There's some really, really important context, which is about the evolution. I want to know, okay, here's a snapshot of what the company was doing during the survey period from date X to date Y, right? But I don't know if the company has improved or if they have declined. And so I would like to see, if we've got these overall scores that we could actually get to an absolute roll-up score to say this year's score is this and last year's score was something else. Or last year we were a green bunny and this year we're a yellow bunny. This year we're a yellow bunny. Last year we're a green bunny. So I think that is a fundamental challenge here to help people understand not just where the company fits, right, but how they are in fact improving, because I think this is one of the things that people want to know when they look at the scorecard. Is this company, been an orange bunny for the, every version of the scorecard? So there's been no improvement. Maybe I don't want to reward what it is that they're doing, even though they're not an absolutely bad actor in the category. So just again, one of the ways I think that the scorecard could be improved, and to help people make informed buying decisions, which is what to have confidence in making the buying decisions. So number one, disclose who the manufacturing partner is, especially if the manufacturing partner is in a different position on the list. Number one, right? I think straightforward right here on the scorecard. Number two is that if there has been a change in position from previous years, that change in position from previous years be shown at some point. Very, very key. I'm now past the page where the Green Egg Awards and the Rotten Egg Award winners are. And so I would, right, in this particular case, right, for original beans, I would have the Good Egg Award winner right here where it could be seen, right? So people could go, oh, not only this, they were the number one position, but the number one position means Green Egg Award, right? That's a good thing. Just a way to help people use these charts and understand what it is that's going on. So we come down here, Ritter Sport. It would be interesting to know, for example, where the corporate headquarters were as a way of seeing. So how many of these are headquartered in the United States? How many of these are headquartered in France? How many of these are Italy? Why do I want to know that? Again, as someone who's involved in the industry, I would say, oh, I'm in the United States. Here's a brand I don't recognize, but I'd like to know more about them. How do I know more about them? And this is another thing. Not one of these things here is a link to anything. I mean, I should be able to click on a 1 here and it would tell me what that 1 meant, right? And I should be able to click on a 2 here. It should tell me what it means. I could click on Ritter Sport. It should take me to the Ritter website. There's a, in terms of, as a PDF, right, which is live, I can download a printable version, but as a live document, we're on the internet age, the fact that all of this information is not included, the links of how to get to companies, is a complete oversight on the organizers. Um, um, I also think that there's no call to action, right? So, for example, if I decided that I really thought that um, this company here, General Mills, was a really bad actor, maybe having a link that what I could do is I could send an email off to the president or to the board of directors, would be an interesting way of, there's no call to action. There's no way for me to, as a consumer, other than to say, I don't want to do business with the company, to influence what the company is doing. Again, a really, really, really bad actor. Or even here, Mondelez. I mean, we have 3 products that Mondelez are associated with Mondelez, but there are many, 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 many products that are associated with Mondelez. So why can't I have a link to a full list of brands that Mondelez owns, right? As part of the data collection process. You're doing these surveys, that could be a part of it. So I could say, oh, I mean, I don't want to do business with Mondelez, Cadbury Dairy Milk, Cote d'Or, Toblerone, but what other brands does Mondelez have just in this space? Unilever. I mean, this is another really, really important thing. Unilever declined, that's what the black bunny means, um, to participate in the survey, but Unilever and Tony's Chocolate Only have a marketing relationship in the sense that Tony's provides chocolate to a Ben and Jerry's, which is a Unilever brand, right? So I know that because I follow this. The average person might not know. Is like, no, I don't want to do any business with Tony's Chocolate Only because they do business with Barry Callebaut for manufacturing, and they have this relationship with Unilever, and Unilever is not disclosing their sourcing practices. I look at this and I go, I mean, and I put together um, an entire post, excuse me, on the Chocolate Life. I believe. Oh, by the way, search is now working. If I search for Wicked, the Wicked Good and Wicked Bad lists, I've started this process. It's incredibly time consuming, as you might imagine. Um, um, but um, you can go through and you can look and you can say, for example, 1-800-Flowers.com has a whole bunch of brands like Harry and David, right? And they fall into my wicked bad list. Barry Callebaut, you may not know all the brands that are associated with Barry Callebaut. There's a list of Barry Callebaut brands here that you may not want to do business with if you don't want to do with business with Barry Callebaut for one reason or another. Cargill, I mean, it's an enormous amount of a list. Valrhona is owned by Group Savencia. Group Savencia continued to do business in Russia right after the start of the Ukraine war. I believe they're still doing business in Russia. You may want to say, I don't want to support any Group Savencia companies because of their support. And so I've got a list of these things. So what are the brands, if you decide you don't want to do business with the Hershey company, here are a bunch of brands that are associated with Hershey. You might not know that they are in fact owned by Hershey. And where some of the relationships. For example, Rolo is manufactured in the United States by Hershey, but the brand is owned by Nestle. So, and if you want to come down here and you want to find about Nestle, you find that if you don't want to have any business with Nestle, you may have to give up on Perrier, for example, right? Who knew they were a Nestle brand? It's really, really difficult. And that's one of the things that I really find frustrating for the amount of in-depth data collection that is being done on some of these companies, that, and it's all publicly available information, or not all of it, much of it, that what we do is we find this mismatch. It's also, I mean, Kroger may have a house brand. Oh, this is Kruger. I'm sorry. I was thinking of Kroger, the retailer. But I'm looking here in terms of what's really interesting about the retailer scorecard is they said, we're going to put all the green bunnies on one page, right? And then we're going to mix yellow and orange bunnies. So it's again, for me, it's an inconsistency in the way data are presented. But what's interesting also to me is that a retailer could in fact be a brand. So I have many of these companies have house brands. And so if I'm if I'm a house brand, I've got a responsibility perhaps for my sourcing policy for my house brand. But as a retailer, I'm selling lots of these other companies. So Waitrose, interesting to know how it has this policy and implementing policy in its cocoa sourcing. But if Waitrose is selling other brands, I'd like to know what those brands are and if any of them are bad actors. And so so Costco may not be as good as Waitrose, Marks and Spencer may not be as good as Waitrose, but I don't really understand if this applies only to house brands or if it applies across the board to everything that they might sell. So a little bit of clarity would be really, really helpful to understand what these mean. And again, a little bit of consistency, or companies are listed by performance, right? And one of the things that we don't know is if we go from, for example, a 2 to a 3. So if I'm listed by performance, what is the difference in terms of absolute number score between getting this 2 and this getting 3? Could it be half a point out of 100, 1 point out of 100, 5 points out of 100? We just have no way of understanding what it is that's going on here. Now, having said that and read through the methodology, uh, there is a much more deliberate understanding and a much more thoughtful presentation of what the methodology is. But you have to be interested in the topic, and you have to wade through dozens and dozens and dozens, like over 100 pages of documentation to be able to help you understand how to go and read what it is that's going on, what you see here, and what it means. And for me, again, this is the scorecard. It is a PDF. All of these things could be active links to be able to go to provide more information. And I think it's a completely wasted opportunity to be able to provide the level of information that I, as a customer, want. I mean, so for example, here's a really, really interesting example going from last year to this year. OFI is Olam Foods International, right? Now, I'd have to know that OFI, the O in OFI means Olam. So from last year to this year, there's been a change, and I, unless I'm knowledgeable in the industry, I would never pick that up. Um, in any event, just um, a short look. It's been a long look in many respects at the chocolate scorecard and how to go and be a much more informed consumer of the information that is contained in this scorecard, right? And you can get a lot of information by comparing the previous scorecards, the 2020, 21, and 22 versus the 23, to see how there has been some evolution that it has occurred in the way the information is presented. I'm not a big fan of the change of the visuals. The fact that every year the visuals are extremely different, right? So here we find eggs with numbers in them. Excuse me. Here we find eggs with numbers in them, and here we find an entirely different visual presentation. We have a much more anthropomorphic, a much more anthropomorphic bunny and much more realized eggs without any indication of what this means, what the number means in absolute terms. Right? There's no numerical scale here. We find that we're missing, this is a very different representation visually of what the bunnies and the eggs are. Again, from a decoding perspective, I understand from the evolution of a visual design perspective, from a graphic design perspective, why this is important, but from an information design perspective, right, there has not been enough attention paid. And the last point that I want to make about this, and I want you to think about this as you go through and look at this, is that, right, this order here, first column is due diligence, right? In the previous year, first column was supports regulation. In 2022, it was traceability and transparency, right? And if we look at where traceability and transparency were here, so what it is was number 2, right? So this change of order, right, seems to imply that some things are more important than other things. So, for example, in the chocolate scorecard, I would like as a part of the explanation of the methodology, because it's not clear to me over the course of several years why this particular order was chosen, right? So the most important thing about confidence in the cocoa supply chain is traceability and transparency. For some people, it might be, right? But it's really, really difficult for me in the printed version to be able to organize this and say, okay, who's doing the best job in child labor, right? Or who's doing the best job if it turns out that agrochemical management, why is that now part of that? And you get the idea that for me, the way the evolution of the presentation of the information has happened makes it much more difficult to understand the evolution that they're claiming to want to capture in the way their methodology all works. And that's it for today. At my new home in Prescott, Arizona. Again, I was in New York City for 40 years. I moved out here. I've been here for not quite a week and just getting settled in. But future episodes of the Chocolate Life Live will be coming to you from this location. And if you ever happen to be in Prescott, Arizona, or in Arizona, come up and visit. We'll show you around the factory. We'll give you a taste of what it is that we're doing and just extend wonderful Arizona hospitality. And with that, thank you everybody for joining me today, especially everybody who started at the beginning, waited all the way through to the end. And just to remind you, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, I think you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everyone, enjoy.